Hi friends, my name is Eric and I'm the developer of Virtuous Heaven, which is a game about infinite dogs, radical friends, and the end of history. It still kind of is that, even though a lot of the other stuff has changed. Anyway, this is the update for the month of December, which means we're talking about what I did in November. So, what was the plan? I think the plan was to conceptualize and build a rough version of the entire map. And it turned out I mostly did that and some other things. So yeah, I did do like a concept of the entire map of the game. I also built out a smaller portion of it in a bit more detail to test things out and to kind of in preparation of like like for me personally, like proof of concept thing, and like to just test out the entire workflow that I want to use for the rest of the game. In a way, I simplified the game's parallax system, and I removed the special attacks again that I put in the game back in October, because when I tested everything, I kind of felt that they were boring. So they're gone again, at least for now. Still not completely, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. This is like an area of the game where I'm like very flimsy right now. So let's talk a little bit about the map. It turns out I can't just sit down and say, okay, let's build a map of the game, because you have to have kind of like an idea of like what purpose it should serve, before you make decisions on, okay, how big does it need to be, how do you want to gate progression, how do you want to handle these things, where are you going to place boss fights? Where are you going to place other elements? How are you going to tie this all up together, and like so that it kind of makes sense from a narrative standpoint? And what is it all that you want with that? And what are your ideas around that? So that meant that I had to spend a long time, and I go a bit more detail into like a video I upload to Patreon, specifically like for the folks who support me there, to talk in a bit more detail about like what all of that meant and how I went through all of that. But basically I spent a good chunk of the month just trying to figure out what I want this game to be again, and how I want to handle progression again, but in a more specific way, and also in a way for myself that I can tell myself, okay, this is how I'm going to handle it, and not in no other way. I ended up with something that I'm currently calling like a soft progression gating. So in general, I still like this idea for Virtuous Heaven, which I hope is going to be what the game is going to be. Still won't gate progression via movement upgrades. You're still starting the game with all of the stuff that you can do. But in order to make, like, there are some reasons why gating or like closing certain areas off makes sense in certain ways, and like in terms of like making sure that you kind of like see specific things in order in a way, and such. But also like what I also didn't want to do was to be very, very strict about that, so that basically this entire area that you see here just becomes like, kind of looks like it's more open-ended and sprawling, but ends up being a straight line if you were to like put it all in sequence. So what I ended up with is something that is where basically there are certain things and certain requirements that you have to hit and that you have to do, but basically you don't. The idea is that you do not have to do all of them in order to finish the game. There are certain benefits for doing all of them, but the idea, at least for now, is to not be very strict about that and to be a bit more lenient in that regard. We'll see how it goes as I'm working myself through this map, because while I was building out like the first chunk of it that I wanted to use for myself as a proof of concept, I noticed certain things that I could be doing slightly different from what I originally intended the critical path to be through that entire area. So we'll have to see how it goes. And in general, like the overall idea for me right now is that you have like two different types of like areas, like very broadly speaking, and you can kind of see it here that you have like these very like dedicated spaces, right? That are like of a specific size, but you also have like a lot of, dead space in between them, and you can kind of see like what I hope the rest of the game to look like. Maybe not as sprawling everywhere, but like in a sense that you have like these connections between these dedicated areas with different kinds of areas that will be thematically different and will serve a different kind of purpose, as opposed to like these quote unquote main areas that there'll be. So that's the overall idea right now. Again, we'll have to see how everything goes, but I'm kind of glad where I ended up with. I'm very happy, and that's like something that I was able to see immediately, very quickly, how having a specified map size for the entire game makes controlling scope creep much easier, because there's only so much space I can fill out in this thing. Sure, I could make it larger, however, doing so in Game Maker would mean that I would have to like extend the map in very specific dimensions, because I cannot just say, okay, Game Maker, give me 200 pixels more space on the upper end of the map, because that's now how Game Maker will increase the size of the room. If I tell the thing to make the room larger, it generally adds to the right and to the bottom of the map. So I would have to do it in that way. So it makes it harder for me to just say, okay, I'm going to make the map bigger. I'm going to make the areas bigger. They're too small, and so on. So because already I can see that this most likely won't be a problem. And also, even if it were become a problem, I'd much rather have something where people say, oh, the map is a bit too small, but the game overall feels nice to play, instead of, oh god, this is a sprawling mess, and I kind of got bored with it after like 2 hours. Like, one of the things that I did this month, kind of also to, again, look a bit at like how other Metroidvanias have were built. I played through Castlevania, Harmony of Dissonance, I think it was, which, in terms of like how the movement felt and like how much that game gave you, like in terms of movement options right from the beginning, was sort of like a very, very early inspiration for what became Witches Heaven. Because I played it for the first time back in late 2017 when I started working on like the character interaction stuff for what is now here in this game. But one problem that Harmony of Dissonance has is that it's incredibly obtuse and annoying. And I think I can just put a period there. Like, it was very hard to figure out where to go next in that game. Very often you found one means of progression, went back to a specific point where you knew, oh, this is where I can now use this new ability to go further, only to immediately encounter another roadblock. So that was kind of frustrating, and also just you unlock fast travel in that game basically towards the very end when you don't need it anymore, because the game requires you to explore the entire thing anyway. So anyway, this isn't meant to be a rant about that game, but it was a very frustrating experience, and I just played through it and thought to myself, I'd much rather have something that people might say is too small than accidentally stumble into something that is, like this, or like that game was. Still like the movement in that game though. That was pretty cool. Wish the rest would have been nicer. Anyway, so that's what the map looks like. Here's just like how what I did with the parallax system, because one of the reasons why I looked at Harmony of Dissonance and also some of the other like especially GBA Metroidvania games was because I wanted to take a look at, okay, how are they doing like parallax scrolling in their games? How are they using backgrounds and this kind of stuff? Because one thing that was a carryover from GB Roba, but frankly from Splinter Zone as well, was the parallax scrolling system that I used, which worked fairly well in with horizontal sections, but wasn't really good at. I could have worked it around in such a way that it was able to do like vertical parallax as well, but it was also very not good at that, because it was complicated in the end. Basically what I mean, like the problem with the previous parallax system was that it completely worked with the layer system in Game Maker, and then there was a whole thing where it constantly calculated the amount the camera has moved in between frames, and then generated or calculated an offset speed for the different background layers to scroll at different kinds of speeds, and it worked well, but it was also very unwieldy, and it had up to 6 different layers, I think, that all worked at different speeds at very specified values, and it was very hard to make adjustments on, and especially when it came to with this idea, I would have had to have different, either a way to dynamically switch out the tile layers, which at some point I tried and found very frustrating. I'm pretty sure it's not as hard as I found it to be back then, but it was something that I just shelved in my mind as I'd rather not do that, or I just have to basically for each major area in this game I would have to have a specific a separate set of 6 different parallax layers that I then switch on and off in between room transitions and whatever. And it's just I thought maybe I should look at a way to simplify this, and this is why I ended up with basically the entire background art and background stuff and background scrolling will be everything that is moving with the camera basically will be handled by the camera itself. What you see here in this GIF is all stuff that is being drawn by the camera object in the background of everything, and then there's, because the camera is already moving, it can dynamically, and I don't have something else that has to separately track the amount of the amount the camera has moved in between frames. That's something that the camera does anyway, so I can just use these values, and it's much more easier to handle for me. It's much more easier to maintain for myself, or for me, because I don't have to work with the layer system. I can just switch out specific sprite variables, and then it works. It handles vertical parallax very well. It's easier for me to switch between different background graphics and that kind of stuff. So it's all there. However, it does have, because I kind of wanted also to reduce the number of parallax layers. That means, and I did that. It could probably handle more, but I didn't want to. So in a way, the backgrounds will be less complex. But I don't think that it's going to be a big deal. Pretty sure that it's not going to be a big deal. And for me, that means I don't have to make 4 to 5 different background assets for each area. Instead, I can just make 3 or 2, and it will be fine. So that's the whole idea behind that, and I'm fairly happy about that. And yeah, so that's what I did for this month. Basically, the big plan is to figure out a way to have like a very streamlined boss fight production process. To like basically that it's much more easier for me to build a boss fight when I need one or when I want to make one, and instead of basically building them all up from scratch. Essentially, what I want to do is something similar as I did with the simplification of like the enemy types that I did back in October, I think. Must have been October, where I kind of like unified enemy behaviors down to like specific archetypes and then just work with modifications within these archetypes. I kind of want to do something similar with boss fights, in that I basically have like a stock boss fight object that has a specific range of like attack patterns that it can use, and then for each different boss fight that I want to do, only use a specific subset of these patterns, and then obviously create variation within that stuff. Just to make sure that, again, that I kind of know in advance, okay, this needs such and such like animations for it to work, that I can that it's easier for me to kind of like know in advance how much workload making one boss fight will be. Like, in a sense, a lot of what I'm doing right now is stuff where it's easier for me to know in advance how much work I'll have to do to get something to a point where it's in the game and working. And it's a very strange thing, because it's like it feels weird, because in a sense the game itself is only progressing like marginally in a way. Like, there isn't a lot more to do in it now than it was back in October, in terms of like, oh, these are like things that will definitely end up in the final game. Most of what I've done so far, I'm fairly certain won't. However, I'm doing a lot of preparatory work here to make sure that once things go into actual production, it will go in a predictable way, and I won't end up burning myself out because I completely underestimated the amount of work that something will take, and then run into time pressure and stuff like that. The other thing I want to kind of do a little bit still is, and I just called it fiddle around with game feel ? Because something I noticed when I built this example area was that sometimes I noticed that the game felt a bit strange to play. There were like certain things where where basically the game feels good to play in very specific situations, and feels horrible in parts when it's outside of these situations. So, and it's even hard for me to describe, okay, what do I mean with these situations? So I'm trying to keep it vague here. But basically, what I want to figure out is exactly what exactly are these situations where the game feels strange to play? What can I do to either reduce the overall amount of these situations, or if I can't do that, what can I do to make them less strange to play? One thing I noticed, for example, is that, and that's a problem with a lot of the previous areas that I built as well, is that especially in vertical areas that went like upwards, I made the mistake in not giving the players enough safe spots where they can just land and take a moment to understand their situation. And instead it was always, okay, I'm going to force the player to move upwards while engaging enemies completely suspended in the air. And when they get hit, usually they fall down quite a lot before they can go again. So what I built that test area in the same way. And I noticed that it was kind of like awkward, especially because also occasionally the camera, or very often the camera, wasn't very good at showing you enemies before you ran into them with vertical movement. Also because the vertical like real estate you have with the camera resolution that I have isn't very large, so there's a lot of like reasons why it is the case. So what I need to do then is find ways to de-emphasize the need to move upwards very quickly, and to make sure that even if you do so, you're not going to, well, like fall down like several screens if you end up running into an enemy that you weren't able to see. So like figuring out ways how to better control sightlines and better control camera movement, better control player movement, like kind of like forcibly slowing the player down a little bit in some situations. And that's like kind of stuff that is important. And once I did that, it started to like moving through the areas felt much more secure and safe, and you could like concentrate more on like the parts of the game where it did feel cool to play it, which is still in there, and so that's part of it. But also I kind of still want to figure out how I can push the physical aspects of like the player interactions with enemies a bit more, how I can make everything feel a bit more kinetic, give everything a bit more weight. At some point or another, I'm most likely going to do a completely work of most, if not all, of the sound effects that are currently in the game, because a lot of them are very old, and I think I can do a lot with just changing those around with effects that work better. I think there's like a big problem there and stuff like that. So I want to fiddle around with that. And I think this is going, like the game feel stuff is something that is going to go on for like a long time, because I think there's a bunch of stuff in there that I kind of have to address, but I have to find ways to address them without having to redo everything, because first of all, I don't think that it's needed, but also there's no time for it. So if you basically say, okay, this is what I have and I have to work with it, then the next thing is then, okay, how can I make sure that what I have is good and reliable, and even if there are occasions where it's not that the negative impacts of these occasions isn't as severe as they were before. So yeah, it's a learning process, and I'll do my best with that. So yeah, that's the plan. All depend obviously on it's like December holidays and whatever, and like how much time I have, but that's kind of like the plan. And in general, what I want to do right now is kind of push all of this towards a state where I have like at around like February, March, hopefully like this test area done that I could then maybe release as like a new demo version for it, so that people can actually play it again and see what has changed and all that kind of stuff. So that's right now the idea a little bit. We'll see how it goes, right? But I'll do my best to get it to that point. But there's still a lot of especially like preparatory work that needs to be done for that. For example, like for the maps and for the areas that I've built, I have not spent a single minute working on graphical assets for those, like level graphics and tile sets. I might reuse some of the ones that I've already done, simply because I would not have to do the work again. but I can already see, and like in the way things are shifting around, that I probably have to redo some of them. But I haven't really thought about those, because for me this is like, and this is again one of the problems I did in the past, is like to go into, oh, this is like legitimate production work in the sense of like I make something that will end up in the final product way too quickly, and then and then you realize, oh, I have to change it, and then, oh, but you already did so much work on it, and what are you doing with that? And then you're just frustrated and don't want to do it anymore. So I'm trying to keep these production specific things on the back burner for now, and just try to concentrate on this, I guess, pre-production. Anyway, I'm learning how to make games. Sure, it's my third commercial video game, and I've been doing this for a long time at this point, but that's also solo game development for you, right? You just learn the things when you learn them, because there's no one else around you to tell you ways to maybe do them better. But anyway, that's the plan. This is where you can find me on the internet if you want to. If you're still using Twitter, you can find me there at Mokograd. You can find me on co-host under the same moniker. I recently learned that MailChimp is going to close down TinyLetter soon, so it's perfect that I recently started using it. I'll have to find a new host for the email newsletter once I have that. You could subscribe to that again. It's so awesome. Like, for years I thought, oh yeah, I should use the email newsletter. I should really do that. And again, the moment I use it, it gets closed down. Who knows? Maybe there's a relation to it. Maybe the universe does not want me to use to make an email newsletter, which is a shame, because I kind of like doing those. The 2 times that I did them. Anyway, I hope you have nice holidays if you celebrate them, or just have a nice month of December, and I'll see you next month, obviously. If you haven't already, Wishlist Witcher 7, follow the Steam page if you can, for reasons that I assume are important. I don't know how SEO on Steam works, but those things are good. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to see the videos there, but otherwise it's fine. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you next year, I guess. Bye.